Greetings, travelers.
Greetings, travelers. We are in the Monster May.
Yes, Monster May continues, and we are getting near the end. And I wanted to celebrate by talking about one of my nearest and dearest favorite subjects. And to do that, I needed to reach out to an expert guest.
I'm just going to say, Mark, somehow you managed to take Monster May and turn it into Mark's Hobby May, is what it
It's
ended up. Mark's
Mark.
like, let's do Monster May, but what I'm going to do is literally have guests that only talk about my hobbies.
Well, I like monsters. It's so Mark Muncy's Monster May, Monster Madness. So it worked out.
You're lucky this is Zoom and I can't punch you because I would right now.
But as we discussed our retro gaming with Eli, I really wanted to move on to retro tabletop gaming. And to do this is where I have a vested interest in this because that's where I got my start writing was for a couple role-playing games way back when that I did freelance writing for, tabletop role-playing games for those that don't know. And also, our guest today has an extensive background in tabletop role-playing.
Without further ado, Mr. Rick Heinz.
Hello. Hi, I'm Rick Heinz. I write sarcastic things about the end of the world and dead creepy stuff. But yes, I also happen to be a hardcore, massive dice gamer and storyteller for many years. So thanks for having me.
You've even taken that to the next level because you created a role-playing game company. So I think we need to start again for our travelers who may not know, what is a tabletop role-playing game? We're going to throw this to Rick. Go.
All right. So a tabletop role-playing game is a shared experience of a collective narrative where a group of players all decide to overcome a challenge where they're allowed to have improv and agency over the story by facing some random hurdles at the same time. Now, those hurdles can come in many forms. Most people know Dungeons and Dragons or Vampire the Masquerade as some of the real popular ones, but even narrative and horror and creepy RPGs like 10 Candles and Dread use Jenga towers or candles. But at the end of the day, a role-playing game is you take on the persona of a character in a setting while a narrator, a storyteller, or a dungeon master guides you through the various types of challenges that you're going to undergo. You're going to tell a story together as a group. Very different than, say, being a novelist where you just have all your characters argue in your head all the time and, pretend that they don't have any agency.
Mark, do you want to add to that?
I was just to say, think choose your own adventure stories, but with improv teams around. You're working with a full improv team instead of just flip to page 34. If you want to go into the dungeon, flip to page 16 if you want to fight the bugbear. This is the sort of thing like that. But as Dungeons and Dragons is hitting its 50th anniversary this year, it's huge. I was just in Lake Geneva. You were there. We went to the Dungeon Hobby Shop where TSR was headquartered. TSR was the original company that produced Dungeons and Dragons. They were one of the grandfathers of all of this. The great Gary Gygax, Dave Arneson, a bunch of names that are big for us nerds. And they had played miniature games, which go all the way back to H.G. Wells's time. He played miniature games and all that. And then they made it storytelling. They added storytelling elements to what was already reenacting battles with miniatures. So those
Yes,
old
and I just want to point out, Mark somehow managed to tie in us ending up in the middle of a cemetery for this as well.
Yeah, we had to go to Gary's grave, Gary Gygax's grave, which a lot of people leave D20s on.
Yep, you got to go. You got to go drop the D20, on the grave. And it's funny is because Gygax, started and created a legacy of popularizing different the way that the game is played. But over the 50 years, the nature of role-playing games has shifted extremely in culture level into how people actually tell stories. And it goes back to that like campfire days, right? You're doing a thing. But there's different styles, right? There's a bajillion different ways to play. And I really like how diverse it is and how many different ways to tell stories there are.
It's not just rolling dice and math anymore.
You two nerds are not going down this particular path because as we talked about on the last episode, Erika's putting in the guardrails And instead, we are talking specifically about horror tabletop role-playing games, and specifically about your guys' favorites and why. And that is going to be a very cold list, because after the break, then we're going to get into a little bit about Rick's own paranormal experiences. So, Mark, I'm going to let you lead this unless you go astray as previously done. So,
Okay, I'm just going to say one quick thing about Dungeons and Dragons, that it did bring in, even its very first edition, started bringing in some of the horror elements that the science fiction and horror writers had written for generations. And when the Deities and Demigods came out by the recently passed James Ward, he included the Cthulhu mythos and the Elric mythos from Michael Moorcock. And they didn't have the rights to them at the time. They just kind of did it, and it caused a controversy. So that's why, if you can find that early Deities and Demigods with Cthulhu and all those great horror monsters in it, it was like, okay, they're adding horror to Dungeons and Dragons. And that
Thanks, Mark. I didn't understand that I had a rare book that I decided to chuck out at some point, because I know exactly what you're talking
edition, about. It goes for hundreds of dollars now. It's crazy. So.
Thanks. It's like retro video games that I used to own. But another thing about horror with D&D is actually really important to me and how I got started and what I grew up in. Dungeons and Dragons, how I found out about D&D was Satanic Panic. My entire life and career and hobby and professional industry to Patricia Briggs starting, that bad organization, or the Mothers Against, Dungeons and Dragons,
right?
Mad, because how dare your children sit in a basement and, summon demons up into the room and learn wizardry and occult magic. They are bringing you closer to the devil. And I grew up on the south side of Chicago, which we're going to get into in the second half of this. And I remember firmly being carrying around a copy of the AD&D with my mom, who's dressed as a white zombie concert junkie. And we got stopped by the police, and they were concerned that I was being raised as a young Satanist. And that was actually an element. And let me tell you, the response from my mom was to take me and buy every gaming book.
Yes.
And to encourage me to go down that path even further, because it was so what? Because of censorship. And the rise of Satanic Panic is actually what caused a 1,000% spike in D&D and TSR sales.
If it hadn't happened, if we hadn't had the 700 Club and 60 Minutes doing those specials on it, it would have been a fluke hobby and probably disappeared.
And so since then, they've always tied devils, demons, lawful, contracts, and the rise of prominent legends and myths and elements to it. And then the Monsters Manual is basically a smorgasbord of cultural, mythology, just thrown together of here's every cryptid and let's put monster stats so you can go fight it or romance it, one of the two.
All right. So that said, okay, now we'll get to our tops, Erika. I'm sorry, we had to do a little bit in the Wayback Machine.
Oh, yeah. Well, you didn't warn anybody we were going into the Wayback Machine, so nobody was strapped in properly. There was not proper snackage. We have rules about the Wayback Machine, Mark.
Hey, we're back now, so I'll go back in time and make it so that I told everybody that we were going into the Wayback Machine and fix it.
You know what? I'm going to just wait in the Wayback Machine for you two to be done. So continue on.
All right, so I've got to say the game that brought me into horror role-playing game besides D&D itself was the granddaddy of all, and that was Call of Cthulhu, which came out long, long ago as well. And that was the reason why Dungeons and Dragons got in trouble for putting Cthulhu in their D&D book. Was Chaosium was this other company that had bought the rights to create a Cthulhu mythos book. And then this was the first game that had a fear mechanic to come out for your characters. So as you saw these strange things, your characters were experiencing things. Now, as a player, as a modern person, these things may not scare you. Oh, the skeleton jumps at you. The ghost comes out at you. We're all like, oh, okay. But if you were that person in the 1890s or 1920s or whichever setting you chose for this, your person there might not have taken it as easy. So they actually introduced a game mechanic, which was sanity. And you would lose that little bit of sanity if you failed your fear check.
It was an incredibly bloody system for those who were playing because more people died by losing their sanity meters than they actually did in regards of hit points.
And it
because
was
yeah, everybody at the table wants to go open like the secret books and discover the scenarios, and there's no winning if they're eldritch horrors.
Yep. And the smarter your character got and the more experience you got, the crazier they became. And that's one of the beautiful things about that system. So the point of Cthulhu was this: you either wanted to die creatively or have your character slowly go insane. There was no happy ending for your character in this series.
Sounds like something me and Beau would like.
That's your favorite one, Mark? Is that
old? I would say, well, that was what started it on me. I wouldn't say it's my favorite, but that was my number one for getting started.
My starting was Vampire the Masquerade had many, many game lines, right? And, it was, billed as the, sort of anti-D&D, right? You'd role play, you'd play these vampires, these immortal interview by the night, type things, go out and struggle with the beast. But that arguably was supposed to be a game that had horror elements to it and romance options, but it actually had kind of already become a political game by the time I found it. But they had another game line called Wraith the Oblivion that was my absolute favorite game and the very first role-playing game that I seriously sat down and consistently played and enjoyed. Now, in Wraith the Oblivion, you start off as already dead, right? Your character has already had a tragic accident or something that has happened to them. And you are struggling in the afterlife to make amends and resolve old links while fighting off oblivion. And it is a game that we would storytell when I was in high school with 2 players by candlelight. And if you had 2 players, one person's job was to sit at the table and play that. They had one character. One person would play the main character. The other person would play the shadow. And their entire goal was to convince the character that they were jointly playing to either resolve their issues and move on or be angry and fade to oblivion.
So I played this game, and when we played, we each played a character, but we also played that sort of demon on another player's shoulder. So we were playing a normal character, but we also were the whisper in the ear. And that was one of my favorite. I think White Wolf is the creator of that gaming system. And that was one of my favorite things because I was not allowed to play anymore after 2 times of playing it because the other character that I was playing the sort of evilness to was gone within 2 gaming sessions.
I could see this, Erika.
Yes.
You'd probably have a way of like, nope, you're going to be angry. Just go ahead and kill the person who killed you back. Just give into it. And because the character at the moment of the game would feel powerful, they could booms. The shadow guide had ways to empower the people next to them. Yep. But there was always a cost. And that cost was you would eventually become a specter and you would like have to hand your character sheet over and the roles would be flipped. But usually you would just end up in oblivion or like as a bad guy at that point. But foundationally, that was the very first game that I seriously played in storytelling. Because even though I read all the D&D books, I was like 10 and I couldn't find a party or anything, or they were just absolutely terrible. Wraith was it. And ever since then, there has been, it would be foolish for me to say that it hasn't had an impact on my writing style and the type of things that I gravitate to, because even the RPGs that I've written for, created, done, and other things usually involve the dead in some capacity.
Okay. An RPGs role-playing game. We're going to use all the words.
Yep.
Mark, back to you.
All right, back to me. All right. So after that introduction with that, I kind of drifted from game to game a little bit. And I got one gifted to me by one of my players that wanted me to run it because I'd been running our D&D game for a while. I'd ran our Marvel superheroes game for a while, and I delved into a lot of the Midnight Suns campaign. I was bringing in Tomb of Dracula and Blade and all that into our Marvel game. So they knew I had a knack for the spooky. I can't imagine where I got that from. So they handed me a game, and it was called Chill.
Oh, Chill. Peter, he's a good friend of mine.
And Bill Fawcett from Pacesetter helped produce it and all that. It's an amazing game. You can set it in just about any setting. It has some incredible fear mechanics. It is a very simple system. Vampire was almost the anti-system, right? It was all about trying not to use dice at all, trying not to use anything like that as best you could. And then this was, again, a bit more balanced. I liked it. It was quick, easy play, had that Cthulhu-like feel to it, but some of the modules in it were incredible. And that's actually one of my first jobs, was writing color commentary on a couple of the modules. We play tested it, we helped launch the game, and we're in special thanks on a couple of the modules. And then I wrote a few little bits for some of the modules that we got to play test, and that was what got me started. So that, of course, I have a love for this game. But I think the peak of that game, they did a module hosted by Elvira, and it was an anthology module called Evenings of Terror. It's super hard to get. It's out of print. Of course, the rights are all tied up. But there were many modules in that were all over the board, and they played like B-movie scenarios. But they had some of the darkest, scariest adventures I'd ever played, and a huge horror just background of material. If you can find anybody willing to play it, there's like 3 different editions of it now. I think the rights are kind of in limbo again because the whole Paysetter debacle, but we'll see what happens with it soon in the future. But you can find a few of them on DriveThruRPG. We'll put the links in the show notes for most of these games, but I highly recommend this one. It's a lot of fun, simple system, but downright scary if you can find some of those classic modules.
I like it. Okay, Rick, the ball's over in your court. Where are we going?
So I jumped around between a bunch of different RPGs. If I rattled off the list, we'd be here for another 15 minutes. I primarily did a ton of LARPs, which are live action role playing games, to use all the full words, where I would host these big immersive events for up to 600 players at once in castles and places like that. And I really kind of had found my storytelling style and voice. And my favorite game that is a horror RPG that I found, and it started because we were using tape recorders, old school classic tape recorders, to record horror messages that we would act out of, like people dying in like news reports and things like that, for players to discover and find. Somebody recommended to me a game called 10 Candles. Now, 10 Candles is a one-shot game that you sit on down, and the concept for the game is all of the light in the world is fading. And you each, as players, light 10 candles, 10 little tea candles in a circle around you. And you create your characters by telling truths of the world. And you record on a tape recorder your last hope and message, because you were one of the few survivors. Now, the scenario about why the light has gone down is entirely open to the storyteller. Right? The players help define a little bit about that. They define who the them are. They're completely undefined monsters. So it's truly a shared creation of the things in the abyss. It could be aliens, it could be shadow creatures, it could be, anything. And over the course of 3.5 hours, those tea candles are going to start melting. As they melt, light by light, when a tea candle goes out, the scene ends. And something happens, and you transition to the next scene. By the end of all 10 candles, it doesn't matter what the characters have achieved, but hopefully they achieved their one objective they may have been trying to throughout the session, but they're all going to die. And then in total darkness at the game session, you pull out the tape recorder after everybody's bonded and gone through all the challenges, and you play the recordings of everybody's hopes and dreams. And you watch people break down in tears as they remember the memories that they had just started with. And it is an experience. I love running 10 Candles.
So I played 10 Candles with Rick, and I have to say, I thought I get points for one of the most creative ways to not get killed in that game until the very, very end when my candle went out. But I came up with a strategery that I think even floored Rick in a moment when I first said it and what it meant.
You started a trend with me, actually. I have actually taken the idea that at the end, it doesn't mean that you are necessarily dead, but what if you are something else?
Ah,
And this is actually a secret. After I ran that game with Erika, I ended up coming back and I figured out a way to make 10 candles a campaign with character progressions. And at some point in the future, Storytellers Forge is going to do something with 10 candles. And we're going to have a means for you to play multiple sessions and show an evolution of the characters.
And I have to say, one of the things that's fun about that for anybody listening who's not played a tabletop role-playing game like this, first of all, it's almost like sitting around a campfire telling scary stories, but everybody's in on the story, which is fun. And I know you guys will probably discuss more games like that. And then on top of it, all you have to see by are these candles. So it's not like a bunch of lights are on and you've got candles going. The candles are all of the light. So it is really an immersive experience in a way because you're all sitting there and you don't know what's coming after you until you start creating it. And we talk about this a lot on other things, is creating monsters. What do people see when they're afraid? Mark, the ball's back to you, my friend. Where are you going next?
All right, I know we're getting to the end here of these lists, so narrowing it down was impossible for me. I've had so many great experiences with horror games. Everything from the Solomon Kane game that came out a few years ago really captured the feel of the Robert E. Howard stories, and it was incredible. I like just variants of Cthulhu like Delta Green, which was modern.
Delta Green's fun.
Delta Green's amazing. And then they had Octoon Cthulhu, where it's World War II, and it's very pulp and adventure-y, but it wasn't scary. I never really felt scared in any of those because they were very much, it's like the Goon and the Hellboy role-playing games. You're heroes. You're not really scared. There are some horror elements, but you're not really scared. The game that I really didn't feel, I felt my first fear in, where I was like, oh my gosh, this is scary, was the Wild West horror role-playing game Deadlands.
Oh, Deadlands, the old Pinnacle system.
Pinnacle.
I got introduced to that game by Shane Hensley himself.
Perfect. Shane's
and
amazing.
Was one of the coolest things, and all the spin-offs. I played Deadlands for years. There's something
we ran a campaign for a long time.
The one thing that makes any horror game truly successful is something that Deadlands, 10 Candles, Dread, which I might mention in a bit, is there's something tactile physically with your hands, your environment, or your sound. And Deadlands allowed you to play with poker cards, chips, in addition to things. But the reason why is more immersion, something tactile that you can either touch, smell, or sight, because in order to have horror at a game session, you have to immerse your players in something, and it can't just be one stimuli.
There's these things you can acquire that are like fate chips, and they were basically, in modern D&D, it's the advantage or disadvantage. You had these fate chips, and when you spent one, it was to save your ass. It was everything. The whole group had to agree, all right, yeah, we need this gunshot to hit, or we need this thing. But there was this whole fantasy element with the world. It was basically,
hold on, Mark, I gotta interrupt you. You left off the most terrifying part of that fate chip. When you spend the fate chip, you're giving it to the storyteller.
And then the monsters or the bad guys have that fate chip to use against you next time. And that's why you had to be 100%. Oh my God, we never want to use this and everything. But basically, the Deadlands world was awesome setting. It was Civil War happens, and right at the Battle of Gettysburg, the height of the battle, where there's thousands dying on each side, the Native Americans are attacked from the netherworld by something that's using all that negative energy. And so it breaks its way into the world. So the dead start getting back up at the battlefield, and zombie outbreak in the Civil War. And then all this other weird stuff starts happening. California has a giant earthquake. The best part about it was this invention comes out of it, this boom of inventions, because there's this material. It's not coal, it's not oil, it's ghost rock. And it's this rock that looks like coal. And when you burn it, it sounds like the screams of the thousands of dead. But it allows the people who use it to make these crazy inventions. So you get mad scientists. You have the card guys, the card sharks are magic users. It's incredible setting. I cannot recommend it enough. We played it, like I said, you'll play it for years. It's an incredible campaign, but you will get scared because the monsters in this are terrifying. The stories are terrifying, and every fight is a fight for your life. And it really, again, those chips, the cards, it's all you draw a card for your initiative, you draw cards for your combat. It's amazing. You're never happy except when you get that flush right when you need it, that inside flush or inside straight. You're like, yes. Yes.
I think you're a really, really big Deadlands fan, and so am I. So we should totally find a time to play some Deadlands.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Moving on. Go to you.
Okay. Oh my God. This is anyway. So Rick, right before the break, which we have to take in moments, what is your number 3?
My number 3, okay, staying away from anything that I've worked on. My number 3 is actually from action fiction, and it's a completely different type of horror role-playing game. It's called Restaurants and Retail for the Monsters in America campaign system. And Restaurants and Retail and the whole action fiction world, Monsters America, is a parody of America dialed up to extremes in modern day. And so you could go to like the Guy Fieri restaurant and go to Flavor Town with like the dragon, and there's funny and comical elements. Stephen Colbert is a joy of paladin of justice and truth. But Restaurants and Retail introduces the concept of exploring the dungeons of Lemuria and like the halls of Amazonia and going to see and play and look at capitalism through an incredibly parodying, distorted lens in like the creepy, like, big giant Costco-esque stores that span forever, designed to trap you in. And like, the only character who could find a way through it is the one character who has the traits of like affluenza to just throw money at the problem. But the monsters they actually put in the game are really twisted and scary diatribes of current culture. And I write urban fantasy. So, seeing and like playing around with that can actually have some really horrific moments as a game system by the concepts they put in there, because you can relate to it, or you've seen it, or you have something familiar with it. And because there's comedic elements in the game, you have that break in tension that you're naturally going to laugh about, and then something like incredibly creepy is going to come around. So for me, it's Restaurants and Retail is my number 3.
Okay, and with that, nobody else is going to talk because we're going to get a word from our sponsors, and we will be right back to hear all of Rick's creepy stories, including what his company just put out as a creepy game as well. We will be right back in just a minute.
The sweltering heat of the Florida sun breaks as a chill runs down your spine. A dark shadow looms from a nearby tourist trap. You didn't expect to find this kind of shade in Florida. If only there was some sort of travel guide to steer you through the spookier locales. Well, you're in luck, reader. Join author Mark Muncy and Carrie Schultz as they lead you through the darkest locations in the Sunshine State in creepy Florida. Available from History Press and at fine bookstores everywhere.
Prepare to be devoured. The Wolves of Wharton is a 6-part complete book series by Eerie Travel's producer, Beau Lake. It has been called dark and visceral, steamy, dramatic, and a fresh take on the werewolf mythos. If you like action, adventure, a large serving of body horror, and some steamy relations, the Wolves of Wharton series is for you. Pick it up wherever books are sold, or at linktree.com/Beau__Lake.
We're back. Mark, where are you at on your nerddom right now?
I just have 2 quick things to say that everybody's going to give me grief for not saying it. But when we talked about Chill, I forgot to mention the organization in Chill that you work for is a company called SAVE. It's a society that knows all the secret things and all this. So I'll get some grief for not bringing that up. But the reason I'll get some grief for that is because that also tied into the one role-playing game that I did mention, because it doesn't scare me because I love it so much. And that's Bureau 13 by the late great Richard
Darn
Tuchel.
it. I knew that was coming. I knew it. I couldn't even head it off. Mark brings up Bureau 13 all of the time, Rick. You have no idea. Somehow we could be talking about teddy bears, and he's like, well, in Bureau 13, they had teddy bears. It's so ridiculous.
So what's really funny here is I have played like 10 bajillion and know so many different RPGs. And I'm not going to ruin the rest of the podcast because I know if I ask this question, it's going to be there, but I have no idea what Bureau 13 is.
It was Richard Tuchelka. He was Tritech Games. He did Fringeworthy. He did FTL 2448 and Morrow Project. These are all old 70s games. And he basically sold them out of his house. They were spiral bound or stapled even and all that. And Bureau 13 was his Men in Black. Bureau 13, the secret branch of the government that hunts UFOs, aliens, monsters, ghosts, Bigfoot, all that fun stuff, conspiracies, all that. It was everything. And the books came out a few years later. Avon Publishing did some novels on it, and the late great Nick Pallotta wrote a few of those. And they had everything from were mollusks to oh my gosh, just a werewolf actually touching a piece of moon rock at an Apollo exhibit, which causes the end of the world. It's an incredible series. The modules for the original game were great. They're very creative, fun. But again, tongue-in-cheek, B-movie style horror, worth your time, a lot of fun. The system is very nitty-gritty, crunchy, so not for everybody, but it's been converted to a lot of other systems.
Okay, so just for the record, I'm going to do the sum up. No more talking about this, Mark. But this game was created before the Men in Black comics, the Men in Black movies, any of this stuff, before X-Files. So it was like the genesis of what the people who created the Men in Black comics and X-Files say they got their inspiration from Bureau 13. That is all we're going to say about it. Mark doesn't get to talk anymore about it because he will do entire episodes on Bureau 13 if I allow him. So you guys will have to hook up and talk about it later. But Rick, let's talk a little bit because you have been writing in role-playing games for some time. We do not have enough time on this podcast to discuss every game system that you've written in, but if you want to throw out a couple and then talk about your most recent one that your company, Storytellers Forge, has released into the world.
So I'll talk about two, which is one that I'm very proud of, and the other, which I'm like mega proud of. One that I'm very proud of is near and dear to my heart is I am the goth kid from the 90s. And so James O'Barr's The Crow, A Tale of Love and Tragedy, Dead Things, is one of my favorite stories of all times. And I know they're remaking the movie, and it's coming out like on June 6th weekend. So, jury's out on that one. But I got a chance to write the official Crow RPG and put my own canon stories into the universe, signed off and officially licensed by, the people themselves behind everything. And to me, that was a big honor, right? And I took all of the things that I talked about in the first half before the break, and I got to put them into play. I got to let the players create their own personal tragedies. I get to let them have their revenge, and I get to take my conspiracies and like throw them back together with my arch villain. But that did just publish last year, and I am waiting for actually two of them published, and I'm waiting for the third one to come out. But I'm very happy about that. But it's still an adventure module. What Storytellers Forge we did, me and a host of amazing people, we had this idea to do a full campaign that is the perfect campaign to run after you TPK your party. And it's the Black Ballad.
Which is what your party?
Oh, TPK, kill your entire party. So in all these other games that we talked about, Deadlands, 10 Candles, every one of these other games, and particularly horror, they always end in death. Well, what happens after that? And in some other games, resurrection magic is featured prominently to bring it back. So it's kind of like no consequence sometimes, right? In the more lighthearted systems. What are the social implications of others or of either of those on an extreme? And we wrote this campaign set in the afterlife, this purgatory realm where every time that you die, you start losing memories until you become unraveled completely. And so your characters are thrust into the crucible of an epic conflict to literally determine the nature of resurrection magic. But what makes it even more special is we partnered with Dia Morte, the heavy metal band, and Mike Pittman from Riot Games to compose a full custom orchestral soundtrack as mood music when you're storytelling. Because if you want to talk about immersion and hitting all the different senses, have that with us. We actually just launched it May 15th officially into mass publication.
It's
Nice.
very, very cool. And I've gotten to see it. And I just love the like, okay, you're dead. So now what? Because it's very true. We've all lost characters in games. And then we're like, this sucks. It's dead. Well, now what do we do? Just so anybody out there that is interested, we're going to have links and everything. But it is a really, really fun campaign. But as promised to our listeners, you've had some weird stuff that's happened to you growing up and things.
Yes. Do you want to hear either the time that Rick almost like turned completely white and ran away from an entire location, or the creepiest thing I've ever encountered that was the most occulty? That's the reason I became a writer.
We got both. We got
Oh,
time.
we have time for both. Let's
All right.
start with number 2, though. Why you
Okay.
became a writer.
So I am a union electrician by day in Chicago. And at the time I was in the field, and this allowed me to explore and go into a lot of creepy places and a lot of hidden parts underneath the city. One of the reasons I gravitated towards urban fantasy was because I get to go into the Chicago deep tunnel projects and know secret roads I can drive out that can get me from Northside Evanston all the way to, I-55 in 8 minutes during rush hour. But the quick story that happened, these two happened in succession, is
So
I was
one piece we should tell people, and when you're talking about it, is there's a sewer system in Chicago, and not everywhere has that, right?
right. There's actually multiple layers of tunnels through the city because Chicago was built upon, you had historically the Great Fire, you had the Great Flood, you had, massive riots at times that demolished huge parts of the city. And so Chicago keeps building itself up. And there's even a deep tunnel project, which is really, really far underground. And they have like these massive boring machines that kind of go through for like irrigation systems and stuff. And it is creepy working down there in a modern age because you will be so far underground, you're completely cut off, and you are just, you'll be walking alone and just hear the drip of water and knowing that there is just no way out for you or no rescue in any immediate type. So it's just an environment that naturally lends itself spooky. But just above those are these old 1908 CTA tunnels. And these CTA tunnels, Chicago Transportation Authority, they had like telephone closets and stuff like that. And I'm going in this area of the neighborhood and I'm going through the CTA closets and I'm pop down into the tunnel and, open up a closet door and, check and redo some wires. And it's just me with a flashlight, some minor tools and things like that. And I'm doing this 2 or 3, 4 times in a row. And I get down to like the 5th tunnel and it's dawn is just coming up and I open up the door and I feel this wave of water and I'm just like, son of a bitch. And I shine my flashlight down and it's not a wave of water. It's actually a swarm of cockroaches that are crawling all over me. And I panicked like hell, go crawling up the ladder as fast as I can. My foreman is laughing. And halfway up the ladder, I realized that I had dropped like my most important tool bag. And I quickly dropped back down, went to go grab the tool bag, and I swear something from that closet moved out to try to grab me and instantly back out. Nope, that was it. That tool bag is still down there to this day. They did go take a look at it. Apparently, later on, I found out that was a place that people were storing dead bodies.
Oh.
And so that was an experience. But that happened after that. They transferred me to a different job site. And this is the creepy one. I was demolishing the Chicago Board of Trade, right? And I was on the Chicago Board of Trade, this old historic building built by Freemasons and a bunch of different societies right there on, Financial Street. And this is a place of power, center, and wealth. And while we're doing this in the one company's office, they had the whole thing decorated like Irish castles, right? With these beautiful, ancient like wood like Irish wood imported right over. And we were taking them off and we were just throwing them in the dumpster. I mean, gorgeous stained glass window, like elements. I mean, the stuff is worth probably a ton, but we were specifically instructed we had to get rid of everything. And the company had like evacuated out. And as we're taking stuff off, though, we keep finding weird occult symbols behind the walls, whether like, just strange, like we didn't know what they were. And my boss, who's a total hippie at the time, is like, man, this place is kind of messed up. And then we start finding more and more creepy slogans about money and power and wealth. And then in the vice president's office, I demolish the panel and I see this big, beautiful symbol circle. And they had a fresh plaque there that says, a man's only worth is how much wealth you can generate, which is creepy as fuck as a statement. And I went and I researched the symbol that was on the wall behind him. It was the official Alchemy Guild symbol, 1863, which was really about turning your soul into gold at the time to be pure of heart. And that's when I was like, you bastards are twisting magic around for your own ends. And it went south. And thus, the foundation of my first book is about a bunch of anarchists in Chicago that discover that the Illuminati and secret societies have had magic forever and how they revolutionize, like, and give magic to everybody in the world. But I actually have that symbol as a tattoo because that was a huge, like, moment for me.
That's got to be creepy, though, working in buildings like that, because there's so much history in them, but so much emotional and different turmoil and intentions just from years and years and years and years. That's got to be creepy.
Yeah, the energy of that place was way off. And I mean, it felt like power, but it felt cold and just domineering, right? It was an interesting place. Now, the time that I like completely was like, nope, I am white-faced and I am white-haired, I am out of here, was, being a weird goth kid. Cemeteries are naturally part of your life. And I grew up on the south side of Chicago. My mom had forbidden me from going to Bachelor's Grove Cemetery many times, which is a traditionally super haunted place where a bunch of Satanists and, ghost lore stories and things like that around there. Where if you mess around in Bachelor's Grove Cemetery, look it up. It's one of Chicago's classically most haunted site. But for me personally, Resurrection Mary was one of my encounters right now. So Resurrection Mary is the legend behind it is that she was a girl who was got in a fight with her boyfriend when they were coming back from a dance or a prom or something like that. And right on Archer Avenue on the south side of Chicago, she gets on out and she starts storming off and she's holding her heels in her hand. She gets completely hit by a car, banged up against the cemetery fence and dies. Or family buries her there, and people are supposed to see her on occasion on certain nights if you're driving by. But if you're a motorist and you get out of your car, she vanishes. Well, I happen to live very close to that, and it was just a regular part of my life that I would be out rollerblading at 2:00 in the morning. I don't know why I was out rollerblading at 2:00 in the morning with a trench coat on, listening to a CD player. I just was on a regular.
Just for the record, you're one of those kids everybody talks about. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Fair.
Mark, have you ever heard of this legend before he continues?
Oh yeah. Resurrection Mary is quite infamous, especially in the Chicago area. So of course it traveled quite a bit. It's one of those that you hear it at an occasional cemetery elsewhere, but we're like, no, wait, that's a Chicago thing, but somebody's told the story, but it happened here. It made the rounds during the creepypasta boom as well quite a bit because it's a great urban legend, but / a little bit of real history behind it.
Which always makes them scary. So, okay, we're out at 2:00 in the morning, rollerblading like a boss.
We're rollerblading through, and it's, foggy, and it's one of those days and whatnot, and it just is a night, and I'm having a good time, and I swear to fucking God, I see this girl in a dress just walking on the sidewalk, right? And right when I do so, and I'm like, oh, the girl's on the sidewalk, I'm gonna hop on the road, right? And I hop on the road, And I didn't realize, because I have headphones on, that there was a car coming up behind me. And I hopped onto the road like I do in rollerblades, and I'm an asshole teenager that just did the thing. Car swerves, actually crashes, hits the fence right where the girl is. There's no fucking girl.
Wow.
And
And that's not the only time. There's so many reports. What, 76, I think, was the famous one. But then I think even 1989, there was a famous car accident there where they said it was a girl in a dress. We swerved to dodge her. And
So they swerved, but they swerved to dodge you, and you thought they hit her.
they hit her, and there was nobody there. And it was just freaking fog and elements. But nope, I purposely got off my like sidewalk to, do a quick hop skip just because I was blitzing and I didn't want to crash into her.
Did the
And
people in the car see her?
I don't know. I didn't stick around. I freaking panicked when there was nobody there. I just bolted and went home, crawled in through the basement window, and started reading Wheel of Time and pretended like I wasn't out at that time of night.
Wow.
so there are a
Um,
couple of theories on who she was, because there are a couple graves there. One of the most famous is Mary Bregovi. I believe she died in like the
yep.
1930s, but she died in the Chicago Loop downtown. So that's why they're like, shouldn't be her. And I guess there's a more recent one. Oh gosh, it's got a name. It's not Mary, it's Maria, but it's like a foreign Maria, like Anna Maria something. And she died in 27 on her way home from the ballroom where the story takes place, where supposedly she went to have a dance and all that. So that theory is the one that's like, okay, this is the story and all that. We'll have to do a deep dive on Resurrection Mary and some of the other hitchhiking ghosts. She's a hitchhiking ghost. She's a lady in white, Erika. So she's probably dating the Hat Man.
I think this is slightly different than my lady in white because she's not near water and she's not whatever, but I get it. She's an adjacent lady in white, but that would scare
Hitchhiking
the
ghost.
crap out of me as well. It has when I thought I've interacted with people and then they're not there, because that's fantastic. So have you ever, working in all these buildings and stuff, are there any other times that you had something move or anything like that?
Oh, geez, tons. Underneath the O'Hare Airport. So underneath O'Hare Airport, if you ever fly to Chicago, there is a significantly long and vast tunnel system that was even like back to like the 1950s as like, military reinforced bomb shelters type things. And working in those, I was able to like rationalize to myself that, the pipes just naturally hiss and make noise. But when you're alone down there at doing overtime night shifts at 3 o'clock in the morning and you see handprints in the like pipe work from like because they're condensed water and like froze like handprints and chill prints in there, when you're like working with the tools and you turn around and you hear something and there's freaking, you're like, right, I'm just going to try to be friends. So I would literally bring offerings every day to work and like try to like make peace with them, what they would be. And then what is the place I was working at? I'm trying to remember the name of the building. But there another place. It wasn't underground. This one was just a classic. It's a merchandise mart. Jesus freaking Christ! So the merchandise mart has, they're constantly changing in, they're constantly changing out, but they always bring in different storefronts and different. They host a lot of fairs. Like they bring in, here's the museum artifacts. We're going to do an auction and a bid, or here's these other parts that are like these old like tapestries from some place that you can come buy for like $200,000 a foot. I don't freaking know. Rich people are weird. And so you were there, and again, it's like always the late night stuff that gets you. It's never the daytime ones. And I don't know, Veil Between Worlds runs thing. And I'm sitting up there on the roof of the merchandise mart with this event going on behind me, and I'm outside and I'm like looking over the skyline and just kind of chilling out. And I turn around to my right, and like this shadow just jumps off the building, like near me. And I'm like, you know what? That is either the biggest freaking pigeon that I have ever seen, or like shadows move and light tricks play. And I'm, you know what? I'm friends with this. I have decided that I'm just becoming friends with all of the like near things around that I can't quite see or never get a direct contact with, but it happens a lot. My mom banned Ouija boards from our house when I was young, and I would always take them out and go use them. You know, there's the Theological Society in Wheaton was a place that I would ditch high school to go sit and like, read books, hang out. So exploring like Chicago's like urban environment and breaking into abandoned buildings was entirely a thing I did for a while. I have yet to make a recent pilgrimage to the new infamous rat hole that is now there. I feel like it is in my nature that I have to go at some
What
point.
is the rat hole?
So the rat hole started over like the COVID closed winter, right? And there is a spot in the ground that of the concrete that looks like a rat literally pressed into the ground and just doesn't exist. It is the perfect type of a hole in the shape of a cartoonish rat that would have been dropped from a building like Coyote style, right? It has become a center of Northside Chicago pride and divinity where people are holding ceremonies in front of the rat hole and purposely preventing the city from repairing it. And more rat holes have started to appear.
Started to appear all over. Yeah.
Yes. So our rodents are telling us something, either that or the infamous like Chicago gargoyle or whatever is really dropping rats from like on top of the atmosphere, from like the atmosphere level.
Chicago
But
Mothman. That's it.
I got to go visit the rat hole. I got to make a pilgrimage at some point.
So we'll have to put a link to it in the notes. So for our travelers who would like to go and see the infamous rat hole, I think I saw the news story about that, but it just appeared one day, correct?
Yeah, it's just a sudden occurrence. It's just there. And if you are a TikTok user, there is an infinite variety of content to watch around the Chicago rat hole.
Yeah, I saw a video of a person actually setting up a shrine and doing the whole invocation of it and all that. And they happen to have a rat just like crawling around on their shoulders and stuff for it. It was beautiful.
I had a pet rat when I was younger. Its name was Tuffy. It was a white rat with red eyes. I had it for 2 years. It was pretty brilliant, not gonna lie.
I had a pet squirrel named Timothy, kind of rat adjacent.
It is rat adjacent. It is rat adjacent. So is there anything just that actually scares you? Is there any limitation you have?
Spiders. The movie Arachnophobia terrified me as a kid because I happened to move into one particular house in Dalton, Illinois at one point when I was very, very young. And I woke up and I was like 6 years old. And I woke up and I was literally covered in spiders. And to this day, I actually have real arachnophobia. I cannot stand them. They are aliens. They need to be burned with 1,000 fires. And I will have other people do that for exceptional sums of money because I'm getting nowhere the hell near them.
That is, well, as somebody who is the owner of a spider and Mark's wife is the owner of many spiders, maybe don't come to our houses then, since we actually have pet versions of these. Mine is a pumpkin patch and it's got a little heart on its butt.
Oh my God, that's terrifying. Oh, yeah, my own son tries to convince me that spiders with top hats are just really cute, but no, it's not happening. Jumping spiders maybe get a pass if they're slightly adorable.
Yeah, but they're the gateway drug. That's the key.
No, but so like that scares me. Insects, like when I obviously got covered in a swarm of cockroaches, and sort of being like it's that stuff I think that gets to me on a horror level. The late at night, dark, abandoned stuff, the kind of weird energy vibes, and
Good
trying
stuff.
to talk. That stuff excites me. I'm not afraid of that, but I'm also incredibly respectful around that kind of stuff. I'm not going to go stick my hand in and try to be a ghost bro and taunt things that I shouldn't be taunting.
Well, that's a smart approach.
All right. Back to role playing. One last question before we start wrapping up. You've been a storyteller for years. I'm sure you've been a player for years. Most memorable horror character death, either as a DM or as a player.
Oh, Jesus. You're asking me about most horrible.
Most horrific, scariest, whatever. I'll start so you can think about it. All right.
Yeah.
Mine was a character I had in the game Blood Shadows, which was from West End Games. It was basically Deadlands but noir instead of Wild West. It was like in the 40s. I didn't even think they did in Deadlands Noir. I never actually got to play that one. But in that one, I was a private detective and we were investigating a crime and I got shot. And I'm like, oh, in this world, again, magic is, we can fix a lot of the things. So I wasn't too concerned I had a magic trench coat, but the bullet went right through the magic trench coat. The bullet went right through me. And then I'm like, why am I not healing? Why is this my undead, basically already undead character already really dying? And it had been shot by a bullet with runes carved in it. And the fact that I knew I was dying and couldn't get the bullet out because it was just one of those, the character moment was terrifying for me and it was horrific. And I love that DM for coming up with that. And that was the late great James Ward, the guy who wrote Deities and Demigod and stuff. So I have a wonderful thing is that I played, he used to give out business cards that said, I survived a game with James Ward, but my character died.
All right. I have one. It's not exactly in horror moments, but it is a horror RPG where we scared a ton of players. After you have been a player or a storyteller in a city for a very long time and you're playing with lots of people like LARPs, where you're playing with 600, 700 people sometimes at a time, and you do that for 10 years, you kind of have a reputation and you know everybody. Everybody knows you. All your usual tricks of the trade start going out the window. And one of my storyteller friends, Jesse Wallace, was running a game and he was like, I want you to play in the game, but you're not allowed to come to the game. And I'm like, what? Okay, how's this gonna work? He was like, everybody knows you. And I was going to play a character who was, the most generic Matt Smith name. He was a bit obsessive compulsive, and he was a cleaner that would go in and like cover up people's crime scenes and things like that if their supernatural stuff started to blow out into the open world. I wasn't a killer. I was really the one cleaning up their mistakes. And throughout the entire game that this ran, every week Jesse would send me a report of all the characters' actions. And I would write these narrative scenes about what the characters find when they come back to game the next game session. Rearranging their house, me making sure that everything's put back in place, the books are aligned neatly, because my character had the ability to ghost into their houses and do this to clean them up. Now I was actually super beneficial the entire game to every one of the characters, but I knew everybody's dark secret, and everybody had, over the course the game, he had a story that he was meaning to tell. The entire game turned into a story about who is the ghost that keeps coming in and messing with our house in a weird supernatural thing and is delivering to us these fictions and knows where we live, knows who I killed, knows that I diablerized somebody, knows that, what blackmail I have, and knows everything about me. And the one day that somebody figured out who it was is they got in my car, and it was near the end of the game, and they had been obsessed with this for like 6 months. They got in the car and they saw one of my business cards for my character that people would use, that we had made like a whole fake account for, to be able to interact with them. And they're like, oh, son of them. And it everybody like had a freaking blast with it, but it had become, and I didn't realize it, Jesse and I had kind of created this conspiracy horror scenario in just this very subtle way around the entire game.
Love it. Love it. Perfect.
That's amazing. Okay, shameless self-promotion time, Rick. Tell people where they can find you.
So you can find my personal website at rickheinzwrites.com, but most of my stuff that you will ever find and everything that we're doing is at storytellersforge.com. You can find us on TikTok at STForge. You can find us on any media platform as STForge Studios. All of our links are out there. Otherwise, I'm Rick Heinz, and you can find my books, the Seventh Age series, available, anywhere, actually. And that's sarcastic urban fantasy about the end of the world set in Chicago with myth, monsters, and legends. And The Black Ballad, if you're into the role-playing side, just released. And I am super proud about that. So go check out The Black Ballad.
Thank you so much for being here with us. It was really fun.
Yes, thank you for having me. And Mark, we're gonna have to do Deadlands.
Yep, Deadlands and Bureau 13. All right. Thanks again, everybody, for indulging us for Monster May. And thank you for indulging me, Erika, for letting me do some role-playing talk tonight and being nerding out. And Rick, thanks for nerding out with me. It's been a wonderful trip down memory lane for all these horror things and bringing back Satanic Panic. We did an episode on that way back with the lovely Maria DeVivo. Definitely check that one out on your own personal Wayback Machine. Just go back and look that episode up, and you'll have a blast learning a little bit more about it if you don't know the true stories. And with that, I will simply say, everybody, make sure you light those tin candles, set up your Jenga board, pull out the Ouija board, and make sure you're ready for a spooky time. And we will see you on the other side.